You know, for a long time, I sort of suffered in silence.
This series is trying to shine a light on these topics.
There is no stigma to me. It's mine. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Today All Day Mental Health Special, Mind Matters Behind the Picture. I'm Carson Daly. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, earlier this year, I shared a picture of me. I was on the set of The Voice, and on the outside, it looked like I'm sure my life was perfect, but on the inside, I was struggling. Panic attacks, gripping waves of fear, anxiety. I was suffering in silence, and I'm not the only one. Hundreds of viewers shared their own stories and pictures, including the 4 people that I'm lucky enough to be here with. Today, we have Laura, Carl, Taylor, and Drew. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for choosing to tell your stories. It's not an easy thing to do. Thank you for submitting your picture, and it's great to see you all. How are you? Good?
Good.
Good. Good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Excited for this conversation. We're here because we're going to have an open chat about a tough topic that not enough people are talking about openly, and that's mental health. Laura, we're going to start with you. You have 2 beautiful daughters whose births brought surprising emotions to your life. Let's take a look.
I would say that my anxiety feels, on my worst days, it is crippling. It can feel almost like you're just suffocating. You are swimming in the ocean with no land in sight. My name is Laura Benefield, and I'm 35 years old, and I'm a mother to 2 beautiful girls, Lucy and Hannon. I have been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder along with postpartum depression following both of my girls' births. When I brought Lucy home, I had no idea what I was doing. Some people say postpartum, they think like you don't like your baby. But for me, it was more like I would get Lucy in the car and put her in the car seat, and I would be driving down the road, and I would have to stop like every 5 minutes because I would be looking at her in the rearview mirror but not see her. Like I would think in my head she was in the driveway. It was scary, and I'd think, oh, I'm going crazy. No, I did nothing, and I sat at home and was paralyzed. There was no self-care there. I wasn't feeding myself well. It was very dark, very, very dark. I honestly did not want to be here. So it took me until Lucy was a year to finally even say I need help. And I finally asked for help from my general practitioner. It's like my life almost started again because I had said help, like not even beginning treatments and just saying help. It was the bravest word I've ever said. And that was hard to do. My general practitioner introduced me to yoga with Adrian. When I started doing yoga, I actually told some of my closest family members and friends, I don't think I've ever taken a deep breath. And it's been able to help me because I've taken it off my mat. Just like we take kids to the doctor and we go to the doctor for a broken arm, we need to normalize mental health. There's so much love that you have for your children that it hurts almost. I'm taking care of these 2 girls, and it seems like a mountain some days. I am in the place now in my life where I'm not going to say I'm completely healed. I still have rough days a lot. But I do feel stronger because I asked for help.
Oh, how about a hand for Laura, everybody? Thank you for sharing that story. Asking for help is difficult. There's a stat that's like from the moment of the first onset of a mental health symptom, the average length of time that goes by before they ask for help is like more than 10 years.
Yes.
People just don't ask for help. You waited, you said, a year. Why was it so hard for you?
I think because I felt like I was crazy. When I say like I physically could not see her in my rearview mirror, she was there. And I learned later that's a part of postpartum. So I just had this cloud over me like I would be crazy. And I think it was a lot longer for my generalized anxiety disorder. I think I've suffered for, 20 years probably. As a kid, I think I was, I just never said anything. I kept it inside.
Right.
So, but it was the bravest thing I've ever done was ask for help.
As a parent, when you're struggling today Do you discuss these things with your daughters?
Like if I think she's having a harder day and she's, kind of not opening up to me, and she knows she doesn't have to, but I always reassure her that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be okay. And sometimes she'll say, I'm okay. I know it's okay to not be okay. And I'm like, then I'm doing my job.
You also made an interesting point about how we should be looking at mental health like we do our physical health. Is that something you also talk to your kids about so that when they grow up, they look at mental and physical as the same?
I do. Like going to therapy. I go to therapy because it's a doctor for my, I kind of explain it like it's my mind.
Right.
Yoga is still, I'm telling you, I don't think I really took a deep breath until yoga. I've been in fight or flight mode since I was a baby.
I got it.
And it's like just running hot, like running on adrenaline all the time. And always nervous about something, anxious. And there was no reason for me to be like that.
A lot of times it is those simple things that people overlook, breathing, like how hard can breathing be? But if you've been in fight or flight, it's a very difficult thing to do. But thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Drew Robinson, professional baseball player for 10 plus years. Many would say from the outside, life looked perfect, but as we're about to hear, there was a lot going on behind the game. Take a look.
I didn't realize in the moment, but I was choosing life. Something that I look back on very often, that in very big or small ways, we all get the choice to choose life every day. My name is Drew Robinson. I'm 30 years old, a former Major League Baseball player, mental health advocate, and a suicide attempt survivor. Pressures of performing and pressures of keeping up were ingrained as a kid, like that I was always a little undersized, kind of brought out this struggle of not feeling good enough, not feeling like I was living up to expectations, and that led to a pretty uncomfortable level of pressure that I placed on myself, and unfortunately became an unbearable weight. And it carried on into my high school career and then into professional baseball, especially when it became my actual job, my actual career. It only heightened. At the end of the 2019 baseball season, I had a season-ending injury and eventually got released by the St. Louis Cardinals, and that ultimately led into me questioning myself within my relationship at that time. I was engaged to Diana, eventually called off the engagement, and then the pandemic happening a couple weeks later. Those three things kind of started leading me to questioning myself within my life. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with myself? Everything I'm touching, I'm ruining. On April 16th of 2020, I attempted to take my own life. Once it happened, I was just sitting there for the next 20 hours. Every second, it's going to happen now, it's going to happen now, it's going to happen now. When I had my first thought towards baseball of thinking I'm not going to be able to play baseball again, I caught myself and really realized I'm thinking towards the future. Maybe I want to survive this. And eventually calling 911 to start the process of getting help. I knew in those 20 hours that I had significant damage. About 2.5 months after the attempt, I had my right eye removed. Luckily, I was able to make an actual comeback and play professional baseball. After everything that happened with one less eye, it was a very powerful experience, but I just found some more fulfillment in being able to be a mental health advocate.
I want you guys to feel comfortable enough to reach out to people that you love and you care about. Just ask how they're doing, tell them how you're doing, and don't sweep anything under the rug.
The Giants were willing to give me an opportunity to actually make this my title and stay with the organization and continue to keep spreading the message for our players. The stigma with mental health in men and just the masculinity part that's attached to men is just a little out of date. The idea that mental health is a sign of weakness or a sign that you're lesser than is so old, because I'm a prime example of what can happen if these things go unaddressed.
Wow. Drew Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. I gotta give you a hug, bro. Come on, stand up, man. I'm just glad you're here, man.
Seriously, thank you.
That's crazy. What was it like immediately when this attempt didn't work? What did you think?
It was just confusion. I was not expecting to be here or be there anymore, so just a very strong level of confusion.
And when did you decide that, getting on this side of it and helping others was something that you wanted to do?
It was legitimately immediately. I was thinking about my family initially right away, like wanting to call them to tell them that I survived. And then the very next thought was, how can I use this in a positive way, a way of hope to try to help people avoid getting to where I got to.
But you mentioned you broke off the engagement with Diana. Where do you guys stand now?
So we're back together, we're back rocking and rolling, we live together. She's just an angel of a person, and she's the most selfless, strongest person I know.
That's great. There's a lot to unpack in the world of professional sports. How's your exploration been in the professional sports? You do that now. What sort of reaction are you getting?
Yeah, I mean, it's really powerful because obviously my story is so public, so that is a very common topic of discussion whenever I'm around, because everyone understands or has seen what I went through. It's been very cool to be that spark of someone, or that starting line for somebody to feel the importance and feel the power and the strength that comes from talking about things, because I think a lot of people think it's a weakness talking about it, that I'm lesser than, but it's the strongest thing in the world. It takes the most strength in the world to admit to somebody they don't have it all figured out.
Right.
And being able to be that conduit to somebody to experience that for the first time, it's a feeling that I'll never be able to match. I'm so proud to be a part of the Giants because we have an in-house full-time sports psychologist who does mental health and mental performance, who's in the next room to the training room. So a player can go in, get their ankle taped, get the ibuprofen, and then go right to the next door and talk about how they're having relationship issues that are taking away from their focus for their performance. But it's about getting the person a little bit more stable in their overall life, and then baseball is the next.
You're my hero, bro.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's something I'm incredibly grateful to be able to experience, and something I'm grateful that I'm still able to help people either learn from my mistake or learn from my lessons, whatever way you want to look at it. Yeah. I just want to give that back so that no one has to experience what I experienced the months before.
Well, you're doing it, Drew. We appreciate it, man. Thanks for your story so much. All right. If you know someone who is contemplating suicide, we invite you to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or you can text HOME to 741-741. We've got a lot more to get to. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Taylor, Carl, you're going to be up next, so we'll do that. We're going to hear their stories, plus more of our candid conversation right here on mental health. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our mental health special continues now with Carl's story. In college, he realized his mental health was suffering and needed to talk to someone. 20-plus years later, he continues to do just that. Here is Carl's story now.
One of the biggest mental health hurdles that I had to overcome was that I had to learn that it was okay to not be okay, and that if I were willing to be vulnerable, I could come out on the other side. I'm Carl James, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. I came out when I was 21. I expected it to look like, kind of the way it's kind of advertised. It's like, everything gets better. All of these things will kind of come in this sort of goodie bag. I think I realized very quickly that I wasn't going to get the goodie bag. I got my family together and I decided I'm going to tell them. The reaction then was kind of hard to put into words, but I would say they didn't quite know how to process it. The conversation that I wish we were able to have would be about, what does love look like? What does a good relationship look like? How do you find a good partner? What do you deserve? Do you know your worth? Those were questions that no one ever asked me. And I think I would have avoided a lot of heartache and pain if I had known the right questions to ask. I was so busy trying to find it anywhere I could get it that it almost didn't matter what it looked like. And it wasn't right. So when I would go into therapy, in my mind, I would say, this is just for, call it 2 months. This is just to make it over the hump or through a difficult period. But I never viewed it as something that I would need consistently. And that was kind of my bias, if you will. Still feeling the kind of perception that therapy is for people who are weak. And there were moments where I felt like I don't have it all together and I don't know how to get it back. That's when I felt like, okay, we need to talk to someone. I bring a certain amount of authenticity to therapy now because I show up as the person who wants to get to a better place. Because I think that's the only way it can really be effective, is if you are willing to kind of sit in the messiness. Because I think the good only comes on the other side if you're willing to deal with some of that.
Beautiful, Carl. Beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. What was it like to watch?
It was a lot. You think about kind of where you were in some of those not great moments, and to be in a place where I can talk about it openly and publicly and where we're having this type of conversation is a testament to the work that I've done and the work that we've all done.
What led you to therapy? What was the final thing?
I think initially it was just realizing that I had come from a background and an environment where things weren't discussed, and feeling like I was experiencing a lot of things that I didn't have the language for. I didn't know how to process personally, and I didn't necessarily feel like I had an outlet.
The experience, if you don't mind me asking, of you coming out to your family, how was that?
I think there were definitely a lot of sort of like cultural things at play. I do come from a religious background. My family was Catholic, and so that certainly played a role. My family's from the Caribbean, and you know, there are just things that they aren't used to dealing with or having conversations about. And how do you have a conversation that you barely have the language for, but that you know other people don't have the language for? And through no fault of our own, we're just all ill-equipped for this moment. And I think one of the things that I've learned that I need to do, and I think we should all try to do, is hold space for people to get better at having these conversations and to grow. You may not have the language now, but that doesn't mean that people don't want that for you and don't want to be able to meet you where you are. But I think sometimes we don't get the initial reaction and then we just kind of like pull away. And I think I'm trying to hold space now for people to be where they are and to process things as they can.
You got a good therapist, bro. I mean, you sound like a mental health. I mean, you sound like a patient, like a therapist dream patient.
I mean, they might not.
Is this the work talking right now, or is this how you've always been?
This is 20 plus years in the making, Carson.
Oh my gosh.
I think
because you're hitting it all right out of the park.
I appreciate that. I think when you've gone through some of the things that we've all gone through, and you realize what it's like to be in some of those not great places, I think for me, I just never want people to be there.
Yeah.
And so if there's anything that I could do to
You're willing
not
to do it.
Let's do it.
Oh my God, you're a great human. You have a partner? Or you
I am very single.
You are a catch, man.
Tell all your friends.
Yeah, not after this, you're not. Man, that's incredible stuff, Carl. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Taylor's mental health journey includes something I am all too familiar with myself, panic attacks. By themselves, they're absolutely terrifying. Coping skills can help immensely, but what happens when the coping mechanisms that you put in place no longer help? This is Taylor's story.
I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be able to look at me and say she's experiencing panic attacks. Truthfully, half the time I didn't want to believe it either. My name is Taylor Pelham. I am 25 years old and I have dealt with panic attacks for the last 5 years. I had my very first one in my advanced biology course. I had no idea what it was. I texted my mom and was like, what is going on with me? I'm having heart palpitations. I'm not breathing well. I left class and I just felt scared. After the first one, I started to have more. I was having a hard time leaving the house, truthfully leaving the bed. I always felt like a very, strong person, and I no longer felt that way anymore. And it was to the point where sometimes my husband Kirk would come and physically get me out of bed to get my day going. So I was really trying to find that one thing that made me snap out of it. Kirk actually helped me find that by starting the shower and making me go in there just to cool off. That made me feel safe. It made it feel like it was ending. I was able to slow my heart rate down. Things were getting a little bit better, and then the boating accident happened 3 years ago. Kirk and I and the dogs had went out on the boat. It eventually took a nosedive on us, flipped over top of us. We were all able to get out and to safety, but it left an impression on me. That was now stemming my panic attacks. The shower was no longer my place to find relief in panic attacks because the water reminded me of being in the lake. I was having a really hard time. I finally realized that, counseling will need to come into play now. It took me a long time to not feel embarrassed or shameful of that. In counseling, it was almost kind of like a Not like a challenge, not a forceful thing, but I ultimately revisited this site on a kayak where it happened, and I just broke down, realizing it happened, I'm okay, we're all okay. I was very persistent in the fact that I was never going to get on a boat in my life, but something switched within me. The last panic attack I had was probably 6 months ago or so. The heavy breathing, the heart palpitations started, but when I am able to recognize it, I try to do it quickly just so I can almost reroute my brain into thinking something different. I feel like I have a lot more control in the way my mind begins to steer.
Taylor, everybody. There's so much to unpack. You and I should go out to lunch because we're spreading the same jam on our toast.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, that's like my story. I don't even know where to begin. Panic attacks are just absolutely.
They're terrifying.
They're absolutely terrifying. How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I'm much better. Last June, I just finally realized that, I was done turning to going to food for comfort, and that ultimately stemmed panic attacks as well because I gained weight and I was no longer happy with myself when I looked in the mirror, and so I really turned to exercise and just being present with my family, my husband, my dogs, just in relationship. I no longer needed the counseling, the medicine, and everything like that because that was giving me the endorphins and the positivity that I needed.
I don't know how it was for you, but wherever I had a panic attack, I would never go back there.
Yeah.
So like I had one in Aspen, Colorado, so I could never go to elevation. So I'd Google cities I was flying to and see how many feet they were above sea level. And that kept happening, and then I was like, I'm not going to let this, define my life. Yeah. But it's easier said than done. It's pretty incredible that you were able to get some control over it.
I think for me, the most frustrating thing is when people ask you, okay, what's wrong? What started this? I can never tell them what is wrong and what started it, what triggered it. You can't explain it, or it sounds so ridiculous that you don't want it to come out of your mouth because you're thinking it.
Right.
And it just makes you seem weak, crazy.
I had a panic attack at a playground with my wife and my 2 young children. And it was coming on, I knew it, and I got so scared, and you don't know what to do. It's just fight or flight. There's, in your mind, it's a false signal sent to you from your brain to your body that there's an imminent threat. I just took off and went to the hotel where we were staying. We're on vacation, and I just hid, scared, like a little boy. Yeah. And that is such a hard pill to swallow as a man, as a father. I left my wife and my children just in some park and went running for my life. I mean, that's a really scary thing to do. But part of healing and part of understanding who we are is acceptance, and I accept that's who I am. And panic attacks are tough, man. It's a hard thing to explain to everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. I could have never done that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, oh my goodness, we've got the best here. My good friend and mental health advocate, psychologist, great Dr. Alfiee is going to join us in this conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. My good friend and incredible advocate, Dr. Alfiee Breland-Noble, has thankfully joined us here to share some insight from a medical perspective. Dr. Alfiee is a pioneering psychologist and founder of the innovative mental health nonprofit, the AAKOMA Project, where you're doing such great work. Please welcome Dr. Alfiee, everybody. Dr. Alfiee, it's so good to have you.
Thank you.
What stood out to you that you've heard today?
Just how normal it is for people to experience these things, right? I think we tend to get in a space where we think we're the only people having this experience. And I think it's just looking at this beautiful group of people and listening to these stories, it is how regular it is for people to have challenges and struggles with their mental health.
For people watching, I want to have a takeaway, right? They're watching this, they get it, they don't feel right. Something's going on. What is that first step?
I think the first step is just acknowledgement. I mean, I think often what happens with people is they shrink into something's not right, there's something wrong with me, and it just sort of spirals down. I'm terrible, I don't deserve any happiness. My mom used to say, she passed away 16 years ago, she used to say, nothing ain't wrong, but something ain't right. And I think it's that acknowledgement that there's something, right? There's something in here, and maybe I'm not ready to do all the things with it, but I can do something. And so that first step is the acknowledgement and then thinking about, do I want to feel better? right? They all feel different. But I think we too often skip to, I got to go fix this. And I don't even know if we always recognize what it is we're trying to fix.
Right, and access to care is difficult. It's more difficult for certain communities than it is others.
Yes.
How do people decipher what's culturally relevant access to care?
I like to ask people, look, as you're scrolling, look and see whose picture speaks to you. Look and see whose bio speaks to you, right? You can go to
Therapist-wise?
Yes, therapist-wise. You can go to websites and you can see all kinds of therapists, like they talk about what their hobbies are. It's just find something that feels like it speaks to who you are. Find something that looks like a mirror to you. And maybe they won't be a perfect fit, but that might be a place to start.
You guys have any questions for Dr. Alfiee? Now's the time.
I think it's also important to talk to the people around you and see what they think could help. Because I was surprised to find out that my brother was seeing a counselor before my attempt, and I reached out to her just because my brother was doing it. So it's like that influential aspect of it to the people that are surrounding you, which is the people that you surround yourself with because you like them and you believe in them. So
I also think there's this thing about finding one person you trust, like really trust, that you can share your secrets with, that you can tell things to and they don't judge you, right? They'll just listen. And I think sometimes we skip over that. We rush in and want to try to fix. And I see you smiling, and the idea is you just need to listen. Like, close your mouth and just listen to what I'm saying.
Why do you guys think mental health has this stigma? You know, we're from the same generation, Dr. Alfiee and I. We won't say our age. We, Gen X, we'll call it. When we were growing up, you know, a lot of this, none of this was discussed.
No.
You were either crazy or you were sane.
That's right.
And there was nothing really in the middle. And I wondered why. Carl, why do you think there's been these stigmas on mental health?
I think it's scary to delve into the parts that you don't understand, that you're fearful of, you've been hurt by. So you're just like, I've developed this mentality of, okay, we need to move forward, until I couldn't move forward because I hadn't sufficiently looked back.
I love the idea of listening to your story. And this idea of when you have any kind of marginalized identity, I talk about this all the time, that you're already struggling with whatever that identity is, right? Whether it's a LGBTQIA plus identity around disability, identity around gender, any of those things, that when you layer on a mental health label or a mental illness label, that makes you feel even more marginalized. And I think for so many of us, it's like, I don't need that.
The lady said, she said, I'm black, I'm a woman.
I don't need to be crazy.
I can't afford to be crazy,
That's
too.
It. Absolutely. That's it.
And that's crazy.
You got good memory.
That's all we talk about, Dr. Alfiee. Welcome back to Mind Matters Behind the Picture. We continue our conversation on mental health. Laura, do you have any idea how many moms can relate to your story?
I hope. If I can just like reach one, you know, it's a big change when you bring home a baby. But I do hope that moms don't feel like less than. I think we put the pressure on ourselves that we need, especially, I think I was adopted, my sister was adopted, my mother couldn't have kids, and I think there was a lot of guilt for me. I thought, I can carry this, but I have this beautiful child, and I'm not happy right now. I think that it's okay to hold space for the women that can't have children. It's not taking away from their story, you know, and it's not, you don't need to feel guilty because you have been blessed with a child.
We're really breaking down like thousands of years. It goes from the ancestry of humans. You know, we're breaking down these stigmas of like what motherhood is supposed to represent, what masculinity as a male in the tribe is supposed to represent. These things have been carried over generationally. And only now are we starting to break them down to say, hey, we're not beholden to those.
That's right. My husband would wear the Ergo baby carrier. I have pictures.
Yeah.
Really, when we were looking through pictures of my firstborn, it was a little different with second because I was aware and I knew, you know, I'd asked for help. But it was my husband doing it all. I mean, he would be sitting there cooking. He would be wearing the baby, you know, and that used to not be the case. It was always, you know, the men were working and the women were doing that.
Right.
And it is very different.
But I think it's wonderful that your husband picked up and did. That's part of what it means to be in a relationship and a partnership. You were talking about, you know, what am I worthy of? What do I deserve? What should I be looking for? That's what you look for. Do you know what I mean? And so it's wonderful that he stepped in and did that co-parenting thing to support you, because that's what you do.
But Doc, what do you do when, like, for Taylor and I who have panic attacks, it's like an impossible thing to explain. A panic attack is a very internal thing where we feel like there's an imminent threat. It's not actually there, but it's very physiological. and like I may have to get up and leave this room right now. Something's telling me that. How important is it to share those things with people around us? I mean, how open should you be?
I feel like you be as open as you can, and while still protecting yourself. So I feel like you know where the line is, where when you cross that line, oh, I've shared too much. I think you have to allow yourself the grace to calibrate that for you. You don't owe it to the rest of us for us to 100% get it. The only thing we need to do is know how to support you. So you tell me what you feel comfortable with me knowing, and then you tell me in a moment of clarity and when you in a place where you can explain it, what you need from me in that moment. That's what I'm responsible for.
That's good advice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would certainly say, like my husband is definitely that person for me, and I feel like he can just see it on my face, in my eyes. I'm quiet.
Yeah.
So for him, it's either try to figure out what's wrong or just be there. And if you're just next to me, because I'm not as fearful around him, and just having him as that stable support is really what I need.
I love that too, because I love the way you described it as like practicing getting it out and then and calibrating what is appropriate for you, because I think it's so important to do that, because otherwise you're just holding it in. And I experienced both ends of that spectrum of compiling super on the rug, act like everything's fine, nothing's bothering me, and then everything compiled and blew up. And then after my attempt, I was an open book, the floodgates open, where I told everything to everyone all the time.
Right.
And that's all I was talking about. So finding that calibration of like when it's appropriate, not even when it's appropriate, just what's applicable in the moment, and who someone next to you is going to be able to do with it is so important. It's
Your topic is so sensitive too. People probably afraid to bring it up.
Exactly,
You try to take your own life. You survived. Now you're helping others who may be in that same situation. They're probably tentative to ask you questions, and so you're quick to say, "No, man, ask me. That's why I'm here."
Yeah. When I was wanting to talk about it, because again, I know what it's like to be in that moment, but I was oversharing. It was just too much. I didn't want the identity to be that I was thinking of taking my life. I didn't want anyone to know that. And then all of a sudden I was like, I tried this and I survived. I want everyone to know,
right,
so that no one does. And then now I've tried to add to like this parts work, where it's like, this is just a part of me. It's also attached to this other person who tries to be a good friend, tries to be a good partner, tries to be a good worker, all these other things. I can be that primal man mentality, but I can also add to that by being an empathetic person who tells people I care about them, how much I love them, while also providing, while also understanding that I struggle at times.
You hear him talk? That's why he's still here. God kept you. We need you.
Right. That's right.
We need you.
That's right. There's somebody out there who's going to relate to, every single person on this stage. And I think if we don't talk about it and we hide from it, people will continue to do what you say. They just sweep it under the rug. Right. They think it's just them.
I feel better when I talk about it. Yeah, I'm the first person to raise my hand to do it selfishly, because like when I walk out of this, I'm going to feel like $1 million, having met people that inspire me, a sense of community, even though all of our stories are different.
Yes.
It's like, I love you guys. I mean, I know I have a small inkling as to what your life has been like. I can relate to it, and I share in it proudly. And I hope that people watching can find that sense of community too by watching this. So talking about it is everything.
Everyone vents. I like to think of it as that. Like sometimes therapy is venting, and everyone in the world vents to somebody about something in their life,
right?
Big or small. You spill a cup of coffee, you vent to your coworker when you get to work. I can't believe there's no rhyme or reason. I don't know the science behind it. I'm not a doctor, but like it just feels good to tell someone how an inconvenience happened, and just to get it off your chest, get it out of your mind. Feels good.
But we've been trained to not vent.
And what is the difference between you spilled a cup of coffee, you're having a bad day, this project that I'm working on at work is really stressful, versus something more extreme that might be happening that's just sort of building? I think we don't even know, we talk a lot about the calibration, we don't know when something really is going on versus I'm just having a moment.
Right.
Right, but I'll say one thing.
Know?
Yes, baseline. I'm always talking about know your baseline, right? And what's your baseline? Baseline is when stuff is just neutral. Do we even know enough about ourselves to know what our baseline feels like? Take 3 days out of your week so you don't have to overcommit to it, and just think about first thing when you wake up in the morning, in the middle of the day, and last thing before you go to bed at night, how do I feel? And rank it on a scale of 1 to 10. And then after those 3 days, you can come up with an average. In general, on each of these 3 days, I was probably at a 6. So a 6 for you is your baseline, and so
that's my number. That was my.
Is it really?
That's my number.
I love it. So any day where you're like a 2, okay, now you know you need to deal with something. If you're a 2 for 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 days, that's how you know the difference between, is this something that's just a nuisance, or is this something I need to deal with? So it's
great.
It's all relative.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Let's take a quick break. We'll continue this great conversation about mental health and why aren't we treating our mental health more like our physical health? We'll get into that. Plus, we'll share those photos that our panel submitted and the personal stories behind them. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Mind Matters Behind the Picture. We continue now our conversation on mental health. You talk a lot about grace. Tell me a little bit more about grace, what it means, how people can find it.
So grace for me really is just about finding the space to like forgive yourself, to be kind to yourself, to be gentle with yourself, and to just remind yourself, no matter what's happening, it's okay. So for me, I practice mindfulness meditation, and that mindfulness is just, can I just be here in this moment? And that's what grace is for me. Can I just be okay being here in this moment, no matter what else is swirling around me, no matter what else is going on? And grace is important for anybody struggling with a mental health concern because of stigma, right? There's so many things telling you you shouldn't be struggling. And because of, you know, sometimes I have this thing that I share with people, your feelings are always valid. You heard me say this, but they're not always accurate, right? So when you have that panic attack, that's a valid feeling. But what are you responding to? Like you said, it's a threat, but it's not. What threat is it, right? There's no real threat right in front of you. So I think understanding that you don't have to be perfect, understanding that you can forgive yourself, understanding you don't have to have all the answers, and understanding that because you are struggling with something related to your mental health or a mental illness, that's okay.
How has that been for all of you, the idea of, you know, when there's that negative self-voice in your head, how tough has it been to sort of extend and find grace and sort of forgive yourself and be kind to yourself?
I mean, I feel like for me, I feel like I always trying to be on it, on my best game, you know, whether that be in my marriage, my relationship with friends and family, or, you know, for me, there's a lot of pressure because if I'm blessed to be a mom in the future, I want to be the best. So Laura, your story really resonates with me. And yeah, I feel like, you know, giving myself a little bit of grace of not being on every single day is okay, and it's natural. And I feel like it's important for people to know that it's okay to not be okay every single day. Yeah.
One thing I want everybody to hear me say, I say it all the time, you are valuable just because you exist, right? So you don't have to be on a game. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be perfect. It's just you're valuable because you're here. Of all the miracles it took to get you here, you made it. And there's so many other people who didn't. So just acknowledging and remembering that just your presence. I always say that your presence is a gift wherever you are. Yeah. It's a gift to you and it's a gift to the people.
It's sad to me to think that there's people watching this that need to hear that.
Yes.
Some of us have been lucky enough to have been told that by family members or parents.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who never had that positive reinforcement in their life. And they need that. They need to hear that.
They do.
So
it's just like the example, you take a $20 bill, you fold it up, you step on it, you get dirt on it, all these things, you throw it around, wash it, it gets wet. It's still worth $20.
Right.
It's a little bit beaten down, it's a little bit dirtied, but it's just gone through some triumph. It's gone through some challenges. It's still
the value is still there.
Still worth the exact same amount of money. So
that's a great analogy.
It's that really good comparison. Always hits hard. And I always like the term grace. It's because I feel like it's always tricky to explain, but grace is having that patience to understand that this is something that's temporary.
Yep.
And eventually, at some point, I'll learn from it, and I'll actually probably thank it for happening, which is something that it sounds weird, but it's. I think grace is patience. I think it's empathy, because to do that, you have to have a lot of empathy for yourself to understand that I'm not at my best right now, but this is a 30-minute phase or a day-long phase or a week-long phase, and you look at it percentage-wise, that's like 0.0001% of your life. Right. It's not the entire description of your life.
Was it extra hard for you to find grace after your attempt to forgive yourself? Was that something that you struggled with at all, or no?
Yeah, I still struggle with it. Trust me, I struggle with it a lot. I still have that critic in my head at all times whenever I feel a negative emotion. That how dare you voice, how dare you feel that way with the life that you're living, how dare you. I think afterwards I was on such a high on life because I had a near-death experience, and I got to physically and visually see the support of everyone showering me with support.
Right, you were reborn.
Which I've understood that that was all there before my attempt. I could have experienced that before if I just would have voiced it, if I would have just explained that I don't have it all figured out right now and I have no idea why and it's incredibly frustrating. Can you help me with it?
I have a Bible verse cube that's in our den, it's a little cube, and it says grace upon grace. I have hard days with that. I pick myself apart. We were talking about it before, like we were nervous, we were talking about how nervous like we were to watch the videos of ourselves because we hadn't seen it.
Right.
And we were going to pick apart our voice, what we looked like,
Right.
And it's like a daily struggle. I have
Right.
to tell myself, I am enough. I'm enough. I'm exactly where I should be. I'm enough, and this world needs me, and that's hard.
Right.
Because it almost, when I say it out loud, I feel like a hint of arrogance in my head. Because, you're like, oh, I'm enough. Like, but that's not where I'm coming from. But I don't like to say that.
I understand that.
You think it takes away the accolades. So like all of the things that you've accomplished in life, you think will be taken away the more layers you peel back and reveal to people. Like it doesn't detract from any of those things of being strong, being confident in certain spheres of your life. You can also feel hurt. You can feel sad. You can feel lonely. Like those are all acceptable.
Right. They're in the pot.
Exactly. While the accolades can still exist.
I remember the first day I was on Twitter, like early. And I remember it asked, the prompt is, like, what are you doing right now? Right, that's at the epicenter of Twitter. And I remember my first thought was, who cares? Like, who would possibly care about what I'm doing right now? And now, this many years later, and the proliferation of social media and the way that society chooses to, so we're up against, you think it's bad to look at yourself on a video thing or whatever. That's because so many people are so busy turning the camera around on them, and they're projecting this idea of what is their baseline of what society should look like, should be visiting, should feel like. And it's for the majority of us, it's so far away from our realities, which makes us feel even worse.
Well, that's why I had to get off social media. I was telling them, I'm off of it. Yeah. Because it was fueling my anxiety too.
Me too.
It's like, oh my gosh, is this what moms are supposed to be, be looking like every day? And everybody's, gosh, their kids have.
It's still unstable and mean girls.
Totally.
Their kids aren't missing a shoe, and they're not like struggling.
Sure they are. They're just not taking pictures of that.
At the beginning of the show, I shared a picture of a day in my life that probably to most people looked like everything was perfect, but on the inside, I was struggling. Each of you here today have brought a picture of a time that you experienced something very similar, and I'd like to take a second for us to go around and share those pictures, and you can let us know why you chose it. Laura, we're going to start with you. Why did you choose this one?
That looks like we are super happy. It's Halloween.
Right.
We're about to go trick-or-treating in our great neighborhood. That was a hard day to get out of bed. There was no reason for it. There was up here, but there wasn't a very visible reason for my pain. But it was a hard day. That was a hard one. So when I see that, I'm like, that looks like the perfect picture.
Right.
Perfect Halloween. And inside I was basically dying.
Yeah.
So.
Very powerful. Carl, you're up. Let's take a look at your photo.
So this photo is actually part of a series of photos that I had put together. And I wanted to touch on my LGBTQ identity. I wanted to capture the sort of difficulty that a lot of LGBTQ folks are feeling in this moment, where they feel like they are under attack, where they're being silenced, where things like "don't say gay" are very much in the media and in the news, and also feelings that I've had personally where I have felt silenced, where I feel like my voice did not matter, was not allowed, and because maybe for some people I'm not gay enough, and for some people I am too gay, and it's like, what am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to feel? So that image for me just sort of captures some of the complexities of my identity being gay.
All right, Taylor, you're up next. Let's take a look at yours. Why did you choose this photo?
So this photo was taken because when I could no longer, go in the shower anymore because it reminded me of being in the water from the boat, I ultimately just gripped my heart necklace here, or my cross necklace here, because ultimately I just give myself to God and, just really let my faith kick in because the fear is so strong. And I was actually about to go through a panic attack on this picture, so that was me just kind of
I can see it, just sort of preparing your...
and I grip it, and when I get nervous and when I feel that anxiety come in, I naturally just grip my cross necklace.
That's awesome.
Oh, I'm going to steal that. Because the picture I put when I was on stage at The Voice on live TV, I have my hand in my pocket, and I'm gripping my thigh. I'm gripping my flesh, like so hard that I probably had a bruise there that night. Literally gripping my flesh, because waiting for this wave to go by. And we know it's going to go by. It's that grip that you need.
Yeah.
Sometimes you literally just want to hold on.
Yeah.
All right, my man, you're up next. Take a look at that. Whoa, look at those guys.
I see these beings are my home, but at one time my irrational thoughts convinced me to leave this picture multiple times. I walked away from this picture. It represents the mask that I had to put on at times, or not even had to, that I thought I needed to put on, because this was moments before I proposed to Diana. This represents the highs and lows of my journey. I think it represents the comeback aspect of my life, because Diana and I are back together, but I think that comeback part of my story wouldn't have happened without the beings in this picture, without the support system in my picture, in my life, because if it wasn't for her, for the dogs, for my family, my friends, my providers, my doctors, my care system, NeuroStar, all these things, I wouldn't be here.
Those are 4 really distinctly different and inspiring photos with so much behind them. On Mind Matters, on this series, we always end with asking the subject this question I'm going to ask all 4 of you. Laura, I'll start with you, but what do you say to somebody who saw that photo of you and they see themselves in you, and they're right at that place, but they do not know what to do next? What would you tell them?
Reach out for help. It breaks my heart to think of, when I look at the picture of me and think other women are feeling like that, to give yourself grace too, and to know that you're enough, to know you're worth enough to get help.
Well, that's important. Thank you, Carl.
The thing I would say to anyone who's struggling is you are not alone. In that moment, whatever that moment is, you feel like you're the only person going through it, and it's almost the worst it's ever been. So recognizing that you're having that moment and that other people have had it and are having it is the first thing. And then the next thing is to understand that there is help available to you, and to take that next step, as Laura was saying, in terms of reaching out for help, whoever that is. I
think for me, it's not letting your mind convince you that you're weak. Because in those moments, that was when I felt the weakest, and I didn't feel as though I had control. And it's just kind of rewriting that narrative that you are, in fact, strong.
I'm going to try to keep it short, but I just have so many things going through my mind. So I'll just keep it to 3 things. 1, strength is not always physical. Understand it takes a lot of strength to address your struggles and face them head on. Number 2, look at mental health and emotional health work as a preventative practice and a preventative empowering experience instead of an emergency crisis reactive reaction. And number 3 is that there's always help. And the last thing, and I think about this picture too, is that the beings in this picture and anyone else in my life would have rather heard from me than heard about me.
Well, that's invaluable. Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Alfiee, I'm going to give you the final word before we close things up. What have we not covered? People who are watching this, 4 distinct stories, great conversation on mental health. What do you want people to know before we go?
I think the only thing I would add to this conversation is something that everyone has said in some way since we've been talking, and that is that every single person out there needs to know that they are worthy. I think you said it, that they are worthy, that they are deserving of love, that they're deserving of something. I always talk about light, and that they're deserving of feeling better than what they're struggling with in this moment, whatever that struggle might be.
I also want to add one thing that's always helped me, and I hear this from a lot of people. They say, like, I have these thoughts. Yeah. I have these kind of crazy thoughts. And thoughts do not represent who we are. No. Thoughts are just thoughts. I look at thoughts as just clouds in the atmosphere. They just move by. So if you're experiencing these thoughts and it's kind of freaking you out that you're having these thoughts, they don't define who you are. No. Wait a second, take a deep breath, because guess what? That thought's going to move just like a cloud. And there's going to be more thoughts behind it. So don't feel beholden to those thoughts.
I agree.
This has been so special. We really appreciate all of you for being here and being so open and honest and vulnerable with all these great stories. Also, big thanks to the great Dr. Alfiee for your wisdom. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for tuning in to this hour for our mental health special, Mind Matters Behind the Picture. We appreciate it. And find mental health resources near you. Visit Project Healthy Minds online. I want to mention I'm on the board, and they are doing some great work over there. You go to today.com/mindmatters for more information. I'm Carson Daly. We'll see you next time on Today All Day.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.